to an edition of the Bonsai Wire podcast from the road.
I'm Andrew Robson.
And I'm Jonas Dupuy, and we are here at the Shepherd Community Center in McKinley Park in Sacramento, California for the American Bonsai Association Sacramento's 62nd annual show, I believe.
Yeah, I'm here doing the demos and headlining, and Jonas is here vending, and we're here doing a podcast, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Our goal was to make some comments about some of the trees in the exhibit, and so if you want to follow along, I will have a post on Bonsai Tonight that has photos of the trees we're going to be talking about today.
Starting out, we're going to be looking at a cypress, maybe a saguaro cypress, maybe a hinoki, some type of cypress, but really, really beautiful tree. A lot of hinokis, they have this temple-like kind of vibe to them. This is a beautiful conifer in the show. Something that's really nice about it, similar to our national show podcast, if you listen to that, is that this conifer has very little wire on it. So it's been a bonsai for a very long time. The pads are really established. There's hardly any wire, maybe just one or two here and there. But it's showing its age of refinement in a pot for a long time.
Hinoki is a timber tree in Japan, and so we expect to see formal upright. And this is fairly formal upright. While this trunk may not be perfectly straight, it's fairly close to that. And the style is definitely an upright style that looks like an old, mature, tall tree.
You know, I actually, looking at it, I really like it. It has a subtle lean to the right, which I really, really enjoy. It gives it, for being a formal upright tree, it gives it just a hint of directionality, which I think is quite beautiful. It's really, really subtle, and I'm not even sure if that will come across in the photo, but the crown just leans ever so slightly to the right. You can see it part way up the trunk, the upper 2/3, the trunk just takes off to the right just a little bit. It's really, really fun.
And so there are a lot of things that anyone would really look at the tree and immediately recognize that's done well, is that it has a nice trunk. There is taper along the trunk. There are some really interesting surface roots. The bark shows incredible age. But that's the easy stuff to see. What's really fun about this are kind of two connected things, which are some of the conventions of what we look for specifically in Hinoki bonsai. And on this tree, the age is most apparent in the structure of the branches. We have these finger-like branches coming out, the secondary and tertiary branches that support these green clouds of foliage, which have been very carefully manicured, especially near the apex, that really give it those cloud-like pads. And that's what we look for in Hinoki bonsai. You don't see that in anything but pretty much, sometimes many junipers, but Hinoki, needle juniper, cryptomeria, it's a smaller subset of our conifer bonsai.
Yeah. The age of the bonsai, we don't just see it in the trunk, like Jonas said. It's in every single component, which is really fun. Great tree. Fun to browse at and appreciate and have here in the show.
Yeah, we also can tell you about the display a little bit. It's displayed with a saxifrage for an accent, but the most striking aspect of the display is the backdrop. And one thing that ABAS has done is they have a few painted canvas backdrops with just very subtle charcoal mottled gradations, more or less, that provide a really cool contrast to all of the either light or dark backdrops we're so familiar with.
Yeah, it's a way to do something new without being too loud about it. It's a subtle kind of evolution of a backdrop, which is nice to see. It allows, it gives us some refreshment from typical bonsai shows that we see, but it doesn't take away from the tree. And I think that's what's super important about it. It's really cool.
It also suggests a lot of depth because it's a little darker near the top and the bottom, which suggests possibly clouds above, land mass below. And it helps you imagine a scene in which this hinoki might be growing. And the last thing I'll say about the hinoki is that it's honestly one of a very small number of cypress family bonsai with a full crown that I know of in North America. They're out there, but there aren't a ton of them. And so I'm actually kind of excited whenever I see a full round apex on a hinoki.
We definitely need more cypress in our community. They're great plants. They're relatively easy to take care of. It's unlike a juniper, we actually pinch it when the new growth comes out. which is fun to maintain those pads once you have it. It's a lot of detail wiring to get that structure kind of set. But once they get like this, it's fairly simple work to maintain. Their hinokis grow in a lot of different places. It's a real versatile plant. It's really fun.
Unless you live in Dallas, and then I'm sorry, they don't do as well in Dallas.
Yeah.
So right next to it, we have another remarkable conifer, also against a different charcoal gradation backdrop, and this is a grafted Sierra juniper.
We see a lot of Sierras in California, and to me, Sierra it's more of it's less of an exciting juniper compared to a lot of the craziness that we see in the Rocky Mountain junipers. But this one has some real craziness. I mean, in junipers, we like either good deadwood, good live vein, or really good ones have both of the two. This one just has outstanding, gnarly, crazy, unbelievable deadwood, which, I don't see this quality of deadwood on a lot of Sierras.
No, and it's you'll see in the photo, the base of the tree is a good 16 inches across, all the lifeline on one side. So we really don't know, is the deadwood on the left, the middle of the tree, the outer ring, or the full other side. This could be a fragment of a very old tree. And as Andrew is saying, I've come more and more to look for different characteristics in different species of juniper. The Japanese species, I want to see movement, twists, undulation, really exciting movement, because that's what those junipers do. We see a different kind of movement in Rockies, and I like seeing that in Rockies. Sierras are more chunky. You're less likely to see twists. You're less likely to see the movement. You're more likely to see massive, ancient, rotten deadwood, and that's the best that we've pretty much come up with in this country for Sierra characteristics.
Yeah, and this one does that super well. I think the branching is a little young on this tree, but this tree has such a great future. It's been grafted with shimpaku, so it's going to be a little bit easier to maintain, less disease problems, all of that. Not that you have to graft junipers. I mean, I know that's a can of worms, but it's this tree has a really great future because it's such a wonderful trunk, and all the branching is in the right spot. With a little bit more detail, this is going to be top notch.
It really will, and I don't mind taking up that grafting topic a tiny bit. A friend of mine has a beautiful Sierra juniper, and he asked social media, hey, should I graft this or keep it Sierra? 2-1, every single person recommended keeping it Sierra. I just asked a question, and I said, will you be able to achieve your design goals for the tree with Sierra foliage? And he said, no, not even close. He said, it'll never get as dense as I want. I can't get the silhouette I want, and I'll have to wire it every year because the branches don't hold. And so it was a really different kind of set of criteria he was going through to decide whether he was keeping it one way or the other.
Yeah, it's interesting. Being a deciduous guy, I like to graft my collected junipers because they're so much easier to maintain when you graft them. That's not to say that I don't find beauty in the natural ones. I certainly do. But from a maintenance standpoint, if you're hiring a bonsai professional, it's going to be a lot more expensive of a tree if you have the native foliage, which is fine. Or if you're working on it yourself, it's just going to be a lot more wiring.
It really will. And so when I see, because we're in a show right now, and so it's very relevant to think through how our judging standards, coming into play with the trees we're looking at. And one of the first things that comes to mind is if the tree is grafted, I'm going to be really picky about precisely where that foliage is, and is it positioned in a way to best highlight the trunk. And so this tree has a lot of drama in the trunk, and the foliage is kind of sitting above that, almost like a cloud floating above the whole scene. And one of the hardest things can be to find ways to integrate that foliage with that deadwood. And so Andrew and I are both kind of motioning down. In time, as this fills in, there will be a good opportunity to develop a back branch, which might peek through below some of the gin on the right side and start to incorporate the foliage with the tree to make kind of a more whole composition.
Yeah, I think some foliage on the lower right would just really just tie this in really, really beautifully. But really, really awesome tree. At least I don't see too many Sierra trunks of this level of interest in the deadwood. It's really special.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. And this will be a tree I'll look forward to seeing what it looks like 5-10 years down the road.
Absolutely. All right, we're gonna move on to a tree of mine actually, so we can totally trash it. It's a white chochibai, flowering quince. Chochibai is a natural dwarf Japanese flowering quince. Nobody really knows where it comes from. There's a lot of myth and folklore about that. But I have a lot of trees in my garden, but this was one I wanted to bring down. One, because it fit in the truck pretty nicely, but two, it's a tree that I've had. It's one of my oldest trees. It was a nursery stock quince. When I started it, it had sizable trunks, the size of your finger, but they didn't really have a lot of interest or quality to them. No, they were taperless. They'd had poor movement, and so I was in high school. I was in a study group with Mike Hagedorn, who I ended up apprenticing with down the road, and he took my beautiful big quince and he cut it. We cut it back to 1-inch stubs everywhere coming out of the soil, and so from those stubs, I completely regrew the tree that we have here, and it's just kind of fun to honor the last 12 years of work that we put into it.
12 years is all from field to show?
12 years from field to show. Yeah, this was probably a Telperion Farms, just white chochibai cutting that they grew, and grew it, as relatively big bush just to get some caliper on it.
A couple things came to mind right away when I saw it. Before I realized it was Andrew's tree, my very first comment was, it's so big. And there were two reasons for that thought. The one is it's a very shrub form chochibai, and it doesn't have the window you often see in front of these. When they're clump style, you often just get the clump. And so I hadn't even peeked inside to see whether or not the interior branches were as heavy as I'd expect for such a large silhouette. Also adding to that bigness is the tree's covered with 2 inches of new growth all over it, which just tells you how happy they are in Andrew's garden. These things are just screaming and reaching out wider and wider, and I wish I could get that kind of growth. Yeah,
white chochibai are kind of fun because of the chochibai family, the white chochibai is the strongest. It's going to grow the most caliper, the longest extensions. So if you have, if chochibai is kind of a borderline plant for you, get a white one because that one you'll have better luck with. The one trade-off, though, is the white chochibai do not bark up like the red ones do. So we get that more smooth Toyo Nishiki quince bark. It doesn't get that craggly, flaky bark, fissured bark that we get on the red chochibai. But they're really, really fun plants. Like Jonas said, it's really dense. It looks like a bush, and that's because chochibai is a bush. This is a really kind of natural representation of what chochibai would look like. Lots of multiple trunks, lots of crazy spastic movement. This show is in April, and deciduous bonsai are designed to look good in the wintertime. And so while this does look like a bush when all those leaves drop, it starts to reveal the magic. And so this time of year, it just finished flowering, so we get to appreciate it for that. Now we get to appreciate the nice, cute little foliage that we get on chochibai. In the winter, this is much tighter foliage than I get on my white chochibai. This is a really nice, small-leaved white. Yeah, this one's really, really slowing down pretty nicely. It's getting to the point where I either need to up-pot it because it's starting to get a little too big, or we need to cut it back. But it's been a really fun adventure getting it to this point. One question for you. In a tree that takes a bush form, there are no distinct branch pads on the tree. There's no window even to the trunk. It is more or less a ball of healthy foliage with tiny leaves. How does one suggest style in their approach to chochibai? It's the arrangement of the chaos that we look for. So it's where does that chaos look best from our front? And so it's really hard to see this now from the photo that you're probably looking at in Jonas's blog or us here standing in front of it in person. But from once this drops its leaves, the chaos looks really good at this spot. This tree's getting to the point where it's developing so much that we might need to cut a window in to see that base, or maybe we start looking at a front change. But now that this design is kind of stabilized, we can kind of start to look at those next steps too. The other thing I've often wondered is this is relatively symmetrical kind of dome, and some of the really interesting chochibai that I see have more kind of organic silhouette shapes. So that's something that I might think about in the future. But without that, there's no directionality, and you can display this left or right. Yeah, a little bit. This one does have longer branches on the right, so you'd have to flip it around. But Yeah, it's fun. I have it displayed with a little shooting star. Nobody really knows where chochobai come from, so, it's hard to pair it with that perfect natural accent. So I just chose something that was more proportionate in size and had some seasonality since the chochobai was mostly done flowering. So it's a little dodecathon, little shooting star.
And the peg stand is probably the most conservative stand choice for a tree of this style.
Yeah, it's a very subtle, stand, very classical, traditional stand. It's a beautiful stand. It's a David Niddle stand, who's one of our more prolific stand makers here in the U.S.
He doesn't always get that wood either. That is a really, really nice wood.
Yeah, I forget what type. It's some type of rosewood, and he uses several different types. But if you need a stand, David is one of our best. The Jita is a Manzanita Jita, which I thought was a fun thing coming down in California. That's made by Austin Heitzman. But yeah, it's been a really, really fun tree to watch over the years. I'm looking forward to the next 12 years with it.
Yeah, and I'm curious what form it'll take because it's about the maximum height you'll ever see out of a chojubai. Often they don't like to grow up. The white definitely more than the orange or red, but I'll be curious, is this a test of how tall they get before they start weakening, or can the ball just keep inflating?
Yeah, I'm kind of curious to see. Because the whites are so strong, and because I really appreciate those massive chochobai that we see in the kokufu, I think I want to grow this one bigger. So I'll probably up pot it, and probably in another 2 to 4 years it'll be ready for a larger pot yet. So it's a fun journey.
Andrew may not know it, but on my first trip to Japan, chojubai this was in 1999, my first trip to Japan, and it was the first species that had been previously uninteresting to me, and I really fell for it the instant I saw one in person. Because in the books I thought, oh cool, a bush with orange flowers. But then when I finally saw one in person, I noticed that the orange flowers had a glow to them, and the complexity was just fascinating. And so it did not take much effort at all to make me a convert.
Yeah, let's move on. This is a Washington hawthorn. The species might be familiar. We podcasted about Washington hawthorn at the U.S. National Show. That was Dennis Voitila's best deciduous winning tree in that now Tokutake pot. This is the same species. Really, really fun to see. Very, very different style than that tree in the National Show. That tree was very natural looking, kind of big informal broom, versus this one's a little bit more bonsai looking, and it's fun to see the two next to each other. It has some beautiful gnarliness to the trunk. It looks like it might have some deadwood at the base, which just adds to the character of this plant. But really nice ramification on this, nice density branching, and beautiful exhibition. It's on a stand that gives it breadth and room, which is so important. Nice balance of aesthetics to the tree. Really fun to see.
Yeah, I got to say the generous stand actually stands out to me. It is kind of relaxing. Like it's nice for me to see. I'd much rather see a slightly large stand than small in a case like this.
Yeah, I think you and I both agree. We see stands that are too small more than we see ones that are too big.
And as Andrew noted, there's a lot of deadwood near the base of the trunk, but unlike most deadwood you'll see on deciduous trees, the color is almost indistinguishable from the color of the bark, which is kind of fascinating, and it just gives it kind of an old, gnarly character, and it's less about whether or not one part is live or dead, and more about just telling a story of what hawthorns do so well is they're a little rough around the edges.
They are, and it's, you see that in the bark, you see that in the form of these trees. These are kind of pioneer plants. They're kind of weeds.
They're not your prissy beech, for instance.
No, they grow all over if you have them in the area. And so this is a fun one. Washington hawthorn is one of my favorites of all the hawthorn family, and there's a lot of hawthorns out there. But Washington hawthorn has a really nice small leaf, so you start with an advantage there. I mean, most hawthorns have small leaves, but this one, the quality of the leaf is a nice shape. It gets outstanding fall color compared to other hawthorns. It's a good one to play with if you have it accessible in your area.
It is. At a glance, if you walked by the tree quickly, it would look like a trident maple. The leaves are very similar in color, shape, and size. And some tridents are a little smoother margin than others, but this is very trident-like.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous tree. It's in really, really nice display.
Yeah, and I know it's in a cool pot. I forget, it might be a Reiho pot, but this actually came from a hobbyist in Japan. Had a beautiful garden somewhere in central Japan, outside of Shizuoka, And I remember I found this pot on the ground under a table. And I don't know if the guy was selling pots or not, but I asked and he said yes. And they probably shook their heads as I took it away. But it was funny that I found that on the ground in just literally some hobbyist house in the middle of Japan.
Yeah, it's a good thing to bring up because this is a pot with good aesthetic that probably was not a fortune to afford. And if you can get used pots, a tokoname pot that's been around for a decade or two or three, you can get the aesthetic you want without the antique Chinese price, which can pair nicely with an old tree like this. I mean, it has, this was a cream pot when it was made. It's gotten a lot of nice patina to it. It's good aesthetic for the dollar.
Yeah, and a nice fit for the tree.
All right, we are in front of a very impressive Japanese maple. This is one of the larger trees, if not the largest tree in the exhibition. It has really nice presence. Big trees in an exhibition, they make you feel small, and this one, it has that presence. And it's not just a big tree; it's a good tree as well, and it's fun to look at.
It makes me want to stand up straight when I stand in front of it because it's taller than me right now.
Yeah, it's really, really fun. You can obviously tell this is a tree that's been around for quite some time. It's got a really nice space. It's a clump style tree, which, for me, I enjoy the clump maples more because that's how they naturally grow. It's the Japanese maples, that is. And so I like multiple trunks. I think the interplay of the trunks is really, really fun. And this one, it's such a big, full, dense tree. Like we said with the quince, it can be hard to see what's going on this time of year, but I actually like that challenge. It invites you to come up, look underneath, kind of walk around it. It's not just all obvious. It's you have to work to see it, which I enjoy.
And that's key to most deciduous trees during the growing season when they have their foliage. But Andrew really stuck his finger right on it when you talk about the difference between larger or smaller trees. You literally have to move your body, turn your head side to side. You have to take multiple steps to get from one side to the other to fully appreciate it.
Yeah, kneel down on the ground, look up. And
it's such a different experience than you have with a small tree where you twitch your eye left or right, and that's the alpha to omega. But here we get a much more visceral experience because we have to move through space to appreciate all that the tree has to offer.
Yeah. It's really gorgeous. I love the tree. It's in a fantastic pot. The stand, again, just gives it nice breathing room. It doesn't, none, even for being as big as it is, it doesn't feel congested. Maybe the table could be an 8-foot table than a 6-foot. Yeah. But the tree itself and the composition just feels really nice.
And one of my favorite things about clump styles for maple, Andrew talked about how it resembles how the maples grow in nature. The other thing it does is it almost forces us out of the habit of making a bonsai out of a maple and instead suggesting that up and out growth pattern that we're more likely to see. And when you have a single trunk, especially the normal X-current form on a maple, they can make beautiful bonsai, or it can be kind of an odd fit at times because it's kind of forcing you into a more horizontal branch structure. Whereas the multiple trunks are already doing the work of going up and out, and then the branches can key from that.
And Japanese maples are nice because, they give nice elegance to a show. There's some nice big collected junipers in the room. There's some nice big trunk tridents. But this is nice because even though it's a big tree, it has a lot of presence. It does have an elegance and a softness to it, which is really nice.
On that note, at the other end of the spectrum, there was a much smaller maple that is some kind of dwarf cultivar. We have yet to figure out which one it is. And it's many of the exact same characteristics that we were just talking about, but in a much smaller form.
Yeah, this is a beautiful maple. I suspect this might be a Kiyohime. It's a gorgeous little tree. There's so many big trees in the room that this is one at first glance you might walk right past, but it's really a quality little tree. Again, it's a multi-trunk form, but it's a wider form than the tree we just looked at Peter, which is more tall and narrow. I like that contrast. It's nice to have both. It's a nice counterpoint and shows you the variety of clump style. Just because something's a clump style doesn't mean it fits into one box. There's lots of different ways to approach it.
From the perspective of evaluating this tree, we would be looking at the trunk. We'd be looking at how well the branches complement the trunk. We'd be looking at the overall kind of silhouette to see, does the silhouette make sense based on the trunk and branches. And it's interesting, the actual core trunk is pretty small, but as it splits into what you might think of as trunk extensions and or branches are a great kind of intermediate structure to the tree, which helps make sense of the overall silhouette, which I think really fits it well.
Yeah, the trunk really fractures very low, in the first inch or two or three coming out of the soil. And I actually think that gives this one even more naturalness than the previous tree that we looked at. It very is true to, it's true to form to how so many Japanese maples grow in gardens and in the landscape.
Yeah, and it's funny. The other thing I'm thinking, I'm so used to looking at deciduous trees in winter where it's just the structure. I keep forgetting to give full credit for just how much mass maples have in summer. Even though it's a lighter feeling because the leaves are so slender, they are broad and you can't see through them the same way. And so they actually take up a ton of visual weight. Maples are actually fairly mighty trees when shown in leaf.
They are. That contrast gives us beautiful counterpoint throughout the different seasons.
And it's such a great reason to justify having shows throughout the season. I am always going to be partial to winter shows and fall shows for so many reasons, but I also want there to be shows during the growing season. I want fruit, I want foliage, I want flowers when we get the chance.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said foliage because the Japanese maple family, each with seedling selections, which is just natural genetic variations on the greenleaf maple, or cultivars like what this one likely is. There's so much different, beautiful Japanese maple foliage that we can appreciate, and this is really the time of year where we really grasp onto that. And this tree does great. It's very lush. It's healthy. I don't see any damaged leaves or anything like that. So we get to appreciate the foliage a lot on a deciduous plant this time of year.
Yeah, and maybe that's why, being that this is Sacramento, they have it in spring, because I don't know what the maples look like in August around here.
Yeah, probably not the best time for a show.
But they did it well, because as we walk through the room, we see accent plants with flowers. We see all kinds of indications that we are in spring right now. And it's just a really fun time to show trees.
There's also a nice Suiseki exhibit here. And, I'm standing in front of a Murphy stone, which Jonas can probably tell me more about. I'm a big stone guy. I have a lot of Japanese stones in my collection, a few California stones. But of all the Murphy stones in the room, this one is actually really, really beautiful. It has nice natural imagery. I think it's, of all the Murphy stones in the room, it's really impressive.
And so I've seen many, many Murphy stones over the years because it's one of our local stones that we see a lot of. I'm curious to hear from you. What does this stone suggest?
This kind of looks like Castle Craig, which is opposite Mount Shasta up in Northern California. It has these big, tall granite rock formations. I mean, you can almost look and see, Alex Honnold or, a rock climber scaling up one of these big walls. It's a really, really beautiful stone. It's got a lot of asymmetry to it and irregularity. So it's organic in its form. But I don't know. I think the imagery is really intense in this stone.
Yeah, it's a funny mix of what we might expect from Monument Valley or some other, prominent palisades in a more, granite-like structure, but it is this wonderful reddish color coming out of the gray. And I think one thing that is two things really make the Murphy stone so evocative. I think the one is it's just a cool geological formation. We're not used to seeing two different kinds of stone growing out of each other. That's just not the average rock on the ground. The other thing is that I think it's easier for them to suggest mountains than a lot of other forms, whereas the basic mountain stone will give us the silhouette of a mountain. These actually give us the texture of our Southwest mountains, which is a more characteristically American form. And I think another reason why we just love these.
It's a little easier to appreciate for a Western audience where subtlety is maybe not our strong suit.
Exactly. It's a much easier starting point, but really cool show. And I've been seeing more and more, or at much higher level, Suiseki displayed in bonsai exhibits in recent years, and it's kind of a fun trend.
It's really taking off. Historically, bonsai and Suiseki are the yin and yang. I mean, they both are, nature that you can hold in your hand. One is plant material, one is the landscape. And, for hundreds of years, bonsai professionals were also Suiseki professionals. They brokered the same things, and it only very recently has that kind of segregated into different communities. but it's fun to see it here in the show. There's a really nice variety of both Japanese stones, it looks like, and native California stones as well.
And considering that the first known image in the world of a bonsai is a rock planting, and so it is a tray with a stone and with a little tree. And that's what bonsai was for the longest time, much before the word bonsai came into play, particularly in Japan, is we had these kind of tray plantings where stone and plant material were all together.
The other fun thing about this Murphy stone is it shows us, you don't just have to get a stone from Japan for it to be a suiseki. And we found that out with our native plant material here in the U.S. and, more recently and even, a long way back. But it's fun to see that with stones as well.
Now, one thing we didn't comment about this composition is how fantastic the daisa is. And it's formed according to a lot of fairly conservative Japanese aesthetics in terms of the support for this stone, but it's really fantastic work. You often don't see such elegance and finesse in a daisa for a Murphy stone, so it's really nice when they come together like this.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. This is a Jerry Braswell daisa, who I believe collected the stone. This is a cut stone, and it's a good thing to note that a lot of stones in Japan, a lot of suiseki are manipulated. You can think of suiseki like deadwood on a conifer. Sometimes you can make some improvements to enhance it, maybe delete some material or round out a shape or something like that. We see that in suiseki. Some very famous historical suiseki that have sold for tens of thousands of dollars, if not more, have been altered. And that's just been a traditional thing. Like we shape our trees to enhance their aesthetic, we do the same with stones too. We don't do a lot of altering here in the U.S., but we do cut the bottoms. And that makes for a much easier daisa, much more effortless daisa for a woodworker.
And so that's kind of our brief walk through this exhibit. Andrew and I love walking around exhibits and talking about trees, so you'll have to let us know if you'd like us to do more of these kind of episodes. Otherwise, because this is what we do when we're not recording, is we walk around and talk about our favorite trees.
We do the exact same thing. Yeah. So thanks for checking this out. Again, all the photos of the trees in this stone are up on Bonsai Tonight, and you can check it out there. There's a lot more great trees in the exhibition we didn't have time to chat about, but if you enjoy exhibitions, then make sure you check out the Pacific Bonsai Expo, which Jonas is putting on with Eric Schrader later in the year. That's going to be another fun opportunity to see some beautiful displays.
And kudos and thank you to the Association of Bonsai in Sacramento, ABAS, for hosting us this time, particularly for bringing Andrew down to town so he could present and giving us the opportunity to hang out here today.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
The music on today's podcast was brought to you by the fine folks at Blue Dot Sessions. Check them out at www.sessions.blue.